Welcome to another episode of Built by Us, the podcast where we explore the stories and insights of local entrepreneurs who are making a difference in our community. I'm your host, Jamie Arroyo, CEO of Assets. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Angela, an accomplished marketing strategist, empathetic leader, and entrepreneur. Angela is the founder of Capeles Agency, a women-owned creative agency specializing in building iconic and resilient brands through intentional branding and marketing initiatives. I'm excited to dive into Angela's journey and hear how she's shaping the future of branding and marketing right here in our community. Let's get started. What are you doing for next year? Like, do you do any forecasting or planning for the next year as you start to wrap things up for
the business?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's that look like?
For 2025, we're actually going through strategic planning process.
Nice.
So for the business specifically, that looks like going through multiple audits on like what we've been doing this year, what worked, what didn't work, what tools we're like using or paying for that we're not really using. And then mapping out financial goals and then going back and say, okay, if this is our goal for the year, then it's about going quarter by quarter and then like how many clients, how many services. And then also in terms of the team, just making sure that we have the capacity to grow sustainably.
Yeah.
So planning has looked like reporting and audits and reviewing hours and team allocation, and trying to find ways that we can continue to connect with the right audience, who is a right fit for us.
Yeah. Do you reflect on the audience that you had in the past year, like clients and what worked well or what didn't?
Absolutely. Since we started a few years ago up until now, our agency has been through a lot of transformation. I started and it was more like a freelancer consultant type of thing. And over the last few years, it's transitioned into a full agency. So that meant that our audiences have changed. I was working with entrepreneurs or startup in their first year or solopreneurs, and over the last few years, as we've grown into a more like full service agency, has been working with bigger clients, small to mid-sized businesses, nonprofits who are established, startups that have a more clear vision for the next few years for them. So we've definitely changed in terms of our clients, their ambition and the purpose, and also some of their goals, I think.
Yeah. What's the difference between the solo entrepreneurs or early stage versus the maybe more established or bigger clients that you have now?
Yeah, I think multiple things. I think the first one that comes to mind is their idea of the business. Sometimes as a solopreneur, and I've been there, you're focused on trying to get something off the ground, and sometimes you're not thinking about all of the different stages. You're not thinking about different people that you might need and resources. So you just have a great idea that you want to, make sure it happens. But when you have kind of like a more established business, you're more clear on the vision, the goal. So it's not just trying to do things. It's, I know the vision, I can make it happen, and we can do more strategic planning. They also have more resources to invest. And I think for solopreneurs, it could be challenging if they don't have a partner or investor. I think most of the solopreneurs that we've worked with, it's been self-funded, their business. So I think that also poses a challenge as to how fast they can grow, the visibility of their business. We do a lot of branding and marketing, so the storytelling, I think they're still trying to figure that out. So that has been some of the changes that we've seen in that mindset for them.
Yeah. What would you say is important for a early stage business or startup to think about? Obviously, they don't have all the resources. So what are some things that they should be focusing on at the early stage?
I think their why would be the primary thing. Sometimes they want to do all of the things, all of the services. And unless you're very clear on why you want to do things and what you want to do, it's going to take them, I think, way longer. So it doesn't matter how many couple $1,000s you spend on branding or marketing or not. If you don't have the right story, if you don't have the right passion, if you don't have the right idea of what the impact is in terms of what you want to make, I feel like it's just not going to happen. So I would say definitely having a clear vision on what they want to do, the impact they want to make, why they actually want to do it. And that's going to help them position themselves differently and be able to say, okay, now that I know what I want to do and how to do it, this is going to be easier. So if they don't have that niche or that like very specific idea, a little bit more refined, then you end up doing like all of these other things and taking on even clients that are not the right fit just because you want to take something in. So I feel like that could be a challenge for them.
Yeah, sometimes the activity can be a distraction from the purpose. It feels like if you're not clear on what the purpose is and why you're doing it, then you're just going to be spinning your wheels doing the activity.
Absolutely. Like we had one of our clients for the strategic advisory kind of like coaching for female entrepreneurs this year. She's focusing a lot on HR, employee retention, multicultural practices and policies for companies. And she had an issue where she was getting a lot of clients for HR policies and doing like an employee handbook. And she was just taking those projects because she wanted to make money and grow. But the problem with those things is once you start doing the things that are not what you really want to do, then that becomes the majority of the work that you're doing. Like you're spending 75 hours doing this, whether you could have spent less time doing what you really are passionate about and what your expertise in, and then you can actually get the right clients. So I think definitely having that niche and going after the right clients, it's going to be key. You know, it's not that you're not going to take money if you really need it, but, you know, in the way that you can align yourself with what you want to do and the right clients and the right projects, then it's going to continue to flow. But I feel like people have to make that change.
Yeah. I think a lot of entrepreneurs fall into the trap of they say yes to everything. And in the beginning, to your point, you kind of have to, right? You're just like taking all the deals or all the clients that you can.
I've done it.
And then eventually you have to, I think the opportunity is when do you say no to actually good opportunities? So if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And only do the things that you get really excited about. Yeah. How did you know that you made that transition?
It's been hard. I think that transition started to happen more about like 3 years ago. That I was like, okay, yes, I can do a lot of things, but that doesn't mean that we should do those things. Like I remember I had a team member that I oversaw at like one of the agencies that I worked before, my own agency, and he used to deal with a lot of data and storytelling, and he used to say, just because we can get this information doesn't mean that we should. So I think going back to those kind of like conversations and thinking about yourself and the business, especially as a CEO, I think when you're an entrepreneur, it's hard to make that entrepreneur to CEO hat change.
Oh, yeah.
So I think once you have that CEO hat on, you have to be like, okay, if this is not going to contribute to the business growth financially or in terms of the visibility or the expertise, then it's not a good fit. I think I'm very direct and I'm very data driven, so I like to see things in that way. So I feel like for those specific cases over the last 3 years, it's been, you know, kind of like that process of going through all of the data and saying, okay, this is aligned for this and this and this reason, this is not for this and this and this, and I'd rather compromise, you know, financially and not getting this much money because this means more to me. And in the way that I can continue to build a consistent brand that goes after this and this and this, then people are going to be able to see that value. So I think for me, it was part a business decision and part kind of like a mission or purpose decision that I want to make sure that the work that we do is reflected in. If you surround yourself by things that are different, then people are going to get confused. So I wanted to make sure that we were very clear about what we do, who we are, our vision, and the impact that we want to make in our community.
That you hit on something. Sometimes people can be confused as to what your business actually does if you're doing way too many things. And I think to your point, there's been organizations that spread themselves too thin because they try to do all things. And then you actually confuse the customer because they're like, I don't know what to come to you for. So being clear on that, I think, allows for customers to actually know when they can approach you.
Like if they can recognize what you do within like 5 to 10 seconds, then you've done pretty bad job with your brand, you know, experience. So I think that's definitely key.
Love that. So what's your superhero origin story? How did you get into entrepreneurship and why marketing and branding?
That is a great question. I don't think I've been asked that question in that way. So we'll see how it goes. I think I've always been passionate about storytelling, about like reading and stories and the community. I actually major in college in journalism. I was curious, like always asking questions, trying to figure out how can we share what's happening, in the community with people in positions of power so that they can do things that can impact positively. So that was kind of like the first time that I was like, this is what I want to do for real. And I went to school for that in Puerto Rico, University of Puerto Rico, great education. And I had the opportunity to be working with one of the top public relations firms in Puerto Rico. And we were handling accounts like luxury brands, entertainment, a lot of restaurants and hotels. Like it was a great experience. It was not journalism per se, but it was a lot of storytelling too. And I was able to use my skill set into sharing the stories about those businesses locally. So that got me really excited. I also work with a lot of videographers and photographers and coordinating events, very high scale for all of these brands. And I got really excited. I had an amazing female mentor, the founder of that PR firm. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up, but I want to be like her. I want to have my own agency. I want to have my own team. So that kind of like sparked the idea for me to do something of my own. And that over the last few years has translated into becoming an entrepreneur. So definitely, I feel like that was pivotal in my career and in my journey. Then I moved to Pennsylvania to get my master's. I'm a little bit of a nerd. I like school. So I applied for Penn State Harrisburg to get my master's in communications and a little bit of cultural studies. And I got accepted. They were like, hey, if you teach for us, we'll pay for your master's. And I was like, absolutely. So I packed all my things. My family helped me move here. And that kind of like started, I think, phase 2 of my journey of saying, okay, I wanted to get more education. I was out of my comfort zone. I was in a different country without my family, without my friends. And I feel like that also helped me understand the world and brands in a different way. So that helped me kind of like figure out that what I wanted to do still had to do with storytelling in the community. Over the last few years here in Pennsylvania, I've been here since 2015, so closer to 10 years now. I had the opportunity of working for the Department of State, nonprofits in the domestic violence realm, and other agencies. So I always had a role about communications and marketing and branding, whether it was kind of like overseeing their marketing departments or kind of like supporting those nonprofits as well. So I was always doing the similar types of roles, but I always felt like stuck. Like, okay, like I was at this nonprofit and I was like the manager of communications, and then at this agency I was a director, but there was not anything that I could see tangible after that I felt like this is it. So when I graduated from my master's, I didn't have like that many job experiences. I felt like I was not getting offered what my worth was. So I decided to create my own agency. I was like, well, if they are not going to give me a seat at the table, I'm going to create my own. I have all of the experience. I had, worked with Carolina Herrera, the PGA Tour. So I had great experience under my belt. And I was like, this is it. I'm going to do it. So I did it for about like 2 years. Then I got into the nonprofit that I mentioned. I worked with Department of State and a few agencies. And the last one that I was at, about like 3 years ago, they closed and fired the department. And I was like, this is it. Like, I've been saying that I'm going to do this full time again, and I hadn't done it. Like, I kept it part time, a few clients per year, but nothing too crazy. And I was like, now is the time. Like, I'm going to work for myself, not for anyone else. I'm going to build the agency that I want for my team, where people feel safe, where we treat clients with respect. And it's about a relationship when we can take on projects that we actually believe in. I think sometimes when you work for other agencies, it's more focused about like profit over people. And that's not how I see life. Obviously, we all need to get paid, but it's not about the money. So I wanted to make sure that I could create that. So I think like my superhero entrepreneur story, it's more about like trial and error and trying to find my space that I felt like could go along with how I see life and how I value relationships and brands and people. And I think it's been a lot about resilience. So I think when I think about some of like the top areas of expertise for me and like my top skill set and like how I see things, it's mostly going back to resilience, like keep trying and trying to find a different way to do things, and how can we do things better? And like when people say no, I say yes. And how can we find a way? So I think that has been part of that kind of like journey of starting as a student, having different experiences of what I think was great and what I think was not great to repeat. And kind of like trying to create a space that fosters that for my team and my clients.
Love that. This episode is built by the Reimagining Our Community Giving Circle. The ROC Giving Circle is a way for the community to support BIPOC-owned small businesses through collective philanthropy. The Giving Circle is managed by the ROC cohort, and its purpose is to facilitate funding to initiatives that support BIPOC-owned small businesses. To learn more, visit roclancaster.org. So resilience takes practice, right? Like things have to happen in order for you to build resilience. So what are some obstacles that you had to face to help you build that resilience?
Oh, I feel like a lot. I feel like for Latinos, especially a lot. I'm Puerto Rican born and raised, and I think when I think about resilience, it goes back to my identity. So I feel like I cannot talk about resilience in the workspace without talking about resilience in my personal life and what it means for me as a Puerto Rican. So I feel like we've been a U.S. colony for a long time, and there's been a lot of traumas that the Puerto Rican people had endured year after year. When we think about the Latino community in the U.S., we've also faced so many things and so much adversity. In my personal life, I face so many things and adversities as well. So I feel like resilience for me has been part of my DNA. Like I'm used to having to go through things and experience things and enduring things. I do recognize that a lot of people have it way worse. But I do feel like for me, life has not been easy. And I think resiliency has come out of all of those things, things that I've endured back home, here. Being a woman of color in central Pennsylvania has been rough sometimes. So I think resilience comes out of, every single interaction or like experience that could be constituted as trauma, whether it's about racism or sexism or about the collective experience of, women, even if we're thinking about the US or Puerto Rico. So I think it's just, again, part of who I am, part of what I've seen. And I think we are strong, like Latinos. We're strong, like we're used to having to fight for our rights and what we think is right. We have to fight for space. We have to fight for making sure that our story is heard. So I feel like all of that was kind of like pretty important in my life and how I approach even my business. When we think about how we like to do things at Capeles Agency, sometimes people say to me like, oh, you feel like you're a therapist. A client can tell me that, or a team member. And I'm like, well, that's a great compliment because I do want you to feel safe. And I do want you to feel like, acknowledged and respected. So when we're thinking about resilience and people that have endured trauma, which is every single person in the world, it's really important that we take different frameworks into account for that. And I think my experience in the nonprofit sector definitely helped me in that, and a lot of the DEI work that I've also been doing. So you start to realize that people are resilient. Absolutely, there's a lot of trauma and issues, but how can we make sure that people feel comfortable in telling their stories? And I think everyone is resilient in their own way. They've been forced or pushed by life or people, but I think it's part of their story. And when we approach brand work or marketing campaigns, we go back to, how every single brand is resilient because their founders or their team members have been resilient. And they, every brand or every person has to go through so many challenges, and you have to reinvent yourself. And as an entrepreneur, either you're resilient or you can be an entrepreneur because you have so many challenges. If you're a small business, and you're trying to get funding, if you're like in the early stages, you're not going to get funding. My business has been self-funded since day one. Well, we just got a grant from Assets. So,
Yeah. I was going to say, early stage come to
so
Assets.
that changed in 2024. But a lot of business owners, have those same struggles. And I think resilience can mean different things. But I think for me specifically, it's just about, going after what you want, doing what you need to do to make it happen, and acknowledging, it is what it is, but how can we look at things differently? So I think that's important.
Thank you for sharing that. And, as you're sharing some of the challenges, not only from being Puerto Rican to being a woman business owner, the location that you're in now in central Pennsylvania, the word that comes to mind is vulnerability. How important is vulnerability in storytelling and in the brands that you work with?
I think it's one of the most important elements for like brands and storytelling. I think, and it's even now more relevant with all of the AI conversations that we're having and tools. I think if you're not vulnerable, people cannot relate with you. And if I cannot relate with you or your brand, I'm just not gonna buy your product, service, or idea. So if you're not vulnerable, people cannot connect with you. I think in the past, there's been a lot of conversations about, and this has been ingrained in our culture about being perfect. Like if there's a mistake, you need to do it again. And like, we've been having all of those conversations that people kind of like freeze and they don't do things authentically. And I feel when you're authentic and vulnerable, people can relate with you in your story. And I think that has also been key for me. Like, I like to tell it as it is. Like, I'm not gonna lie. If you want to know, how I started and like how much money we make in year one versus now, we can have that conversation. And I feel like people are afraid to do that because they feel like people are going to react negatively or they're going to think less of you. And I think there's so much power in being vulnerable. Like, this is who you are. This is your story. And I think there's perfectionism in that, like you can be perfect and make mistakes, like when we're thinking about it from a vulnerable standpoint. So I think it's very important for people to be vulnerable, and even more so for brands, so that people can actually connect with what you're trying to do. I feel like if you're not vulnerable, people are gonna notice. I think you can tell when someone is disingenuous, like either in their copywriting or like the images that they choose for their campaigns, or how their brand speaks, or how they even present themselves. So I think definitely super important. It's something that we promote a lot with our clients. Like, we want to make sure that it's your story. Like, we will never use the same social media graphic for 3 or 4 different clients. We're not going to say the same, words, because every brand is different. They have different visions, ideas, and they impact their communities differently. So I feel vulnerability is key. And I think we're going to continue to see more of that over the next few years. I know there's a lot of, concerns with like AI and technology, and now more than ever, authenticity and vulnerability, it's way more important.
Yeah. I feel like you can tell when someone, while AI is great in some aspects, it's a tool, but you can also tell when someone uses it, and then all of a sudden you kind of lose trust there, right? You're like, wait, you didn't write this, or that wasn't produced authentically, and it kind of creates a barrier with trusting that person or that brand. So
absolutely,
yeah,
I agree 100%.
So tell me about being a Latina business owner. So you mentioned some of the challenges. What does that mean to you as to be a Latina business owner?
I think is a powerful thing. I also think it's challenging depending on where you're located. I think it's not the same being a Latino businesswoman here than it would be in Florida or California or, I don't know, New York City. I don't know. So I feel like definitely the location could make a difference. But being a Latina businesswoman for me means opportunities. It means responsibility and privilege. I feel like I never saw a lot of Latino owned businesses. And I feel like now I have a responsibility with all of my Latinas and Puerto Rican women, so that they can see that this is possible. It's not easy, but we can make it happen. And we can do more things when we're together in community. So I feel like responsibility for sure. I feel privileged too to be able to do what I love every single day. I'm not saying it's easy every day, but definitely I think it's a privilege that not everyone gets to experience, of having ownership of how you want to approach things and who you want to work with. I think that's also very special. I think for me, it also means being the first, like in my family. I didn't have like any, family member creating a business from the ground up. So it's also exciting that, I'm doing that. I'm also working with my dad. I hired him this year. So it's great, being a Latino woman that can continue to build community and bring family members and friends who could be a great asset for the team. I don't know. I think it means so many things, but I think it's exciting. I do think there's a responsibility component attached to it. It's part of what I was born to do, I think. I think we can impact people in so many different ways. And I feel happy that I can do that now, through their stories and making sure that people can hear about them, in the right way, in the right channel, at the right time, so that they can continue to make impact. I think a lot of Latino businesses, we do have great data, we do have great ideas, but I think we lack into how competitive we look. So part of my goal of being a Latina business owner is to make sure that we can help with that visibility of Latinos, that they can be like, okay, now I feel comfortable with how I show up online. And I think that's key for us.
There's this saying that I used to say, and I heard it said a different way that I appreciate more, but it used to be, you can't be what you can't see. And for some reason, it kind of actually, like I agreed with it, but it felt a little weird. And then, true story, I don't know if you watched Blue's Clues as a kid. There's like a new version. There's a 2024 version of Blue's Clues. So watched it with my son. And there was an episode that they said, if you can't see it, be it. And I like that so much better, because I think for folks like us that are first generation entrepreneurs, college graduates, homeowners, name it, right? First person in your family to do something. You don't always get the opportunity to see it. So you have to become it. You have to be it so that folks behind you can see it. So I can relate to that in a little bit, that saying, like, how do we be it?
I love that. Yeah. We have to be it, and we have to make sure that other people have the opportunity too.
Yeah. So you mentioned you hired your dad recently. So tell me about that, and how's the relationship now that you guys are working together closely?
It's been great. I'm really excited. He has great experience. He worked for over 40 years for the retail industry, kind of like overseeing the whole operations and teams that had like 300 people or more. So he's used to making sure that all of the stores were profitable by X percentage, and like there was structure. And he was looking for an opportunity because that company closed. And he's like, well, I'm closer to being retired. And I was like, well, before you retire, please come join the team. I was like, I can't compete with multi-million-dollar companies, however, yet. But we can work on different things. So it's been a great opportunity. He's been able to help me audit the business. I think as a CEO and founder, I'm more visionary and creative. I'm like, these are all the things that I want to do, and this is my one. And he's like, okay, that's a great idea. So if we look at the numbers, this is the story that the numbers are telling me. So he's been able to support a lot on kind of like the numbers and operations. So that has been great, because he's taking a lot of work off my plate that I was like, I can't be all of the roles at the same time. So yeah, it's been a great experience. He's been auditing and telling us, things that we need to change and how can we make things better. Like one of the things that I was like, oh, that makes sense, but I hadn't really thought about it. That aha moment. He's like, so you've been in business since 2018 and you never raised your pricing in like 5 to 6 years. And I was like, no. And he's like, that can't happen. Like the cost goes up and all of these things. And I was like, well, duh, it makes sense. So it's been really interesting to go through all of those conversations to kind of like what we can do to grow the business sustainably and to make sure that we do so many other things, So that has been great. We've been going through all of our SOPs and like making sure the team has like the right structure. And the relationship with him has been great. We have a joke that he calls me La Jefa every time that we're like within work hours. It's actually part of his contract. But it's part of like a joke too, just making sure that we can be, goofy and play around too. So within 9 to 5, he's my COO and I'm the CEO. And like after work hours, like he's my dad and I'm his daughter. So I feel like we're both very strategic in mindset. We're very like data driven, like organized, like this is like how we should do things. And I feel like that has worked well for us. Like I understand how he operates and he understands how I operate, which is pretty similar in some cases. So I feel like that's part of why it's been pretty smooth. So yeah, I'm really excited. It's only been since May, so it's been like a few months, and I can already tell like, okay, we're definitely looking better, feeling better for 2025, and I think we're better positioned to keep growing year after year.
That's great. And you mentioned a point about you being the visionary and almost and needing this operator to join. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, as you grow, forget that either you're the operator or the visionary, and it's very hard to be both at the same time. So making sure you have a partner or someone on your team that can be one of those for you.
Yeah, and I like to do the fun stuff. Like I like to be with the team. I like to coach them and train them. I like to do the stuff. So it's been good to be able to hand off some of the more technical things so that I can work on, the team and business development.
Yeah, that's great. And you also teach at Penn State now. Tell me about that.
Yes. Well, it started a few years ago, when I got my master's as part of kind of like they would cover the master's and I would teach for them. And then I've been able to keep doing that like at least once or twice, 1 or 2 classes per year over the last few years, mostly in communications or humanities and cultural studies. So this semester, I'm teaching a lot of communication courses and then introduction to Latino studies as well. So it's been great. I have about 90-something students, anything from undergrad to non-traditional students, and I really like it. It's a great way to keep current, with what's happening in the world, to be able to challenge students and ruin their lives, like they said, because they can't look at things in the same way anymore. But I think it's a great experience to make sure that we keep giving back. I've had great professors in my lifetime, and I wanted to make sure that I could contribute to students' lives in the way that they contributed to mine. And I think we need more young professors that have actually, the experience on field for those different areas. And I think students benefit from that too. Like I hear all the time, like, oh my gosh, like it's so cool that you've actually doing this and you can tell us how to actually do it. And it's not just a framework from the 1920s or I don't know. So it's also good to see that kind of like retroalimentation that we're both kind of like learning from each other, but we keep pushing students to do kind of like better, I think. It's been great. I mean, it's a lot of work. I'm teaching 3. Maybe I'll do 1 or 2 next semester. But it's definitely a great experience.
Yeah, that's great. This special podcast episode is built by the Lancaster County Community Foundation, which uses this transformational potential of community-based philanthropy and the power of endowment to help shape a Lancaster County where every individual is valued, has a sense of belonging, and has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you to our friends at the Lancaster County Community Foundation for making it possible to provide access to training and lending for entrepreneurs. You mentioned earlier that there was a mentor that you had that poured into you, and it sounds like you're paying it forward by paying it or pouring into students now. So,
absolutely. I feel like he changed my life. I met him in 2015, Dr. Korathi. If you're listening to this, it's you. He's done great work. I think he's one of those mentors that becomes family, and I think you can have professors that just assign you a grade and give you a lecture and that's it. He's one of those professors that actually wants to grow with you and help you, challenge you when you need to and say like, this is not okay. This is how you should be doing things. And this is why, or providing those spaces for growth and conversations and learning. So I think he's been a great mentor, and I know that he's touched so many lives by now. That I need to pay it forward. Like he says, like I'm building my Karathi army, and I'm one of those persons in that army, like making sure that all of the lives that he's touched, that we can continue to provide that support back, and that students can feel like empowered to do the things that they want to, but also to help them critically think, which I think it's so needed in today's world. So definitely he's been a great mentor, and I have him in mind every week.
Yeah, love that. So you mentioned, from Puerto Rico, and I think actually we met during a panel discussion
Yes.
of a screening. It was a documentary about Puerto Rico and the devastation that Hurricane Maria had left behind. Can you talk to me a little bit about, your connection to back home? How do you still give back to the community? And I know you spent some time with your business there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Puerto Rican, super proud. I
Aren't
can't
we
lie
all?
about it. I was like, yeah, I'm not dressed with the flag because it's too much. No, but I'm very proud of our history, of our people, of all of the accomplishments that we've been able to make despite the limited resources. That was a great, panel, that event, talking about Puerto Rican identity and the experience post Hurricane Maria. So for me, Puerto Rico is really important. I take our history very seriously. We were talking about resilience before, like the resilience of the Puerto Rican people through so many years has been so important for me. Fighting for what's right for the community, fighting for what's right for the people, for the country. So Puerto Rico is very important to me. I think I've been connected to our country in different ways. The history, obviously, the arts and music and dance. Like I used to be in dance companies in Puerto Rico, kind of like dancing like folklore and like very typical dances. So I've always been involved with our culture. So Puerto Rico is on my mind every single day. I go back pretty much like 6 to 8 times out of the year. The majority of our team is in Puerto Rico, actually, and we have clients in Puerto Rico. So part of how I want to give back, it's, not only having the team that it's represented, our clients there, so that we can keep helping them grow and look, as they should, very competitive, and also supporting, different organizations locally that need the visibility or resources to be able to continue to spread the message. So I think for me, it's something very personal. Not only is important for the business, but for me as an individual too. I'm on the dissertation stages of my PhD, and I'm actually analyzing the American imperialism over Puerto Rico and the element of national identity and how it's changed, especially after Hurricane Maria and so many other things that we've had over the last few years. So I think I'm married to Puerto Rico, and whether it's through work or school or anything that I do, I'm trying to find ways to always give back, to be able to share visibility about our story and what we can do to help our communities. So I think it's something very near to my heart, and something that I hope gets, more shared now over the next few years, because there's so much resiliency in our people. And I think the people who are maybe not in Puerto Rico, in the island, we have privilege and so many other opportunities to be able to share that visibility of how can we do things better. And I think you do a great job of that here. I feel like most of the Puerto Ricans that I've met, who are living outside of Puerto Rico, share that same mentality of like, how can we give back? How can we make sure that with the resources that I have, or the privilege that I have now, I can do things to impact positively our communities? Also, the clients that we work with have a very close connection to the communities that we're impacting. So that's also another way that we can be, finding the right fit for us in terms of clients. It's clients that, take their community seriously.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is a sense of responsibility we feel for us who don't live on the island, that recognize our privilege, and how do we use the influence, the power, resources that we have here to advocate for our families back home.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. I want to talk about the entrepreneurial mindset because you talked a lot about resilience, challenges. It's not an easy thing to do. So, what type of mindset do you have to stay in this game?
I don't know the right word to describe the mindset. I think it has to be a combination of so many things.
Mm-hmm.
In order for you to be able to endure entrepreneurship, resilience, obviously, we talked about it. I think you have to be very strong. I'm not a professional athlete, but I do admire a lot of the mindset athletes have and the discipline.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like for you to be a successful entrepreneur, you need to share that same mindset of being driven and the discipline. Actually, something I admire, of you too. Like you have a very driven kind of like personality, and you're like, this is how I'm going to structure my day.
It's a little
I
crazy, but yeah, thank you.
but I do echo that. I think it's
Yeah.
really important. Like, you cannot be a successful entrepreneur and you don't prioritize your self care,
Yeah.
making sure that you are active and you have like a strong wellness kind of like system or kind of like program that you go through. I think it's also really important your community and who you surround yourself with. I don't think I would have been able to make it this far by myself. I think it's really important to have that close support group that helps you, keep yourself inspired, because not every day is going to be great.
Yeah.
And when you're an entrepreneur, I think a lot of people romanticize what that looks like. And it's like, oh, yeah, it's fun. You work for yourself and you traveled. And it's like, yeah, but you're not just thinking about yourself. Like, when I'm stressed, the times in the year that I'm stressed, I need to think about my team.
Yeah.
When you're in charge of payroll and the operational expenses for the business and your client's reputation, plus the growth of your business and you as a leader for the team, like you have so many different things happening, plus your personal life. So I think entrepreneurship, like the mindset has to be really strong. Like you have to be a strong person, you have to be resourceful, you have to be driven and disciplined, because if not, if you don't do it, no one's going to do it. Like, I'm my own boss. Like, and if I don't have someone like myself, very strong minded, I could have easily just not do the work. Like, it's easier for you to say, well, I'm tired today. It's been rough. I'm just not going to work today. I'm just going to sleep in. That can happen for an entrepreneur. And not that you can take a day here and there when you're overwhelmed, but I feel like you have to be disciplined. Like, you can't do things if you don't have a roadmap, if you don't have goals in place. So I think you have to be strong.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I appreciate you saying, even the word discipline is it kind of sticks out for me. I think about, I've been fascinated with LeBron James as he approaches 40 years old and just is dominating. And it's someone that, like longevity, like that's the word. And I think you can only reach longevity with discipline, resilience, and yes, taking care of yourself, but still having to show up day in and day out.
Absolutely. I think it's really important. Like, if people don't show up, like, it's time goes by. Like, it's already December.
Yeah,
I
forget
feel
about
like
it.
if I think about it, I thought that we were just starting the year and now we're like gonna start a new year. So I think if we're not disciplined, like, it's just, we're not gonna get anywhere. And I think we also need to have people that can hold us accountable. Because I think life is hard, responsibilities are tough, but I do think people can do it. It's just, you need to want to do it really badly.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny you said it's already December. I'm reminded that if you're not already starting 2025 this month, you're already
You're late.
behind. Yeah, yeah. So I think a lot of folks think, oh, I'll start that in January. It's like, no, it starts in the fourth quarter. And
Exactly.
that's how you have to be thinking about things, because to your point, time just flies.
Yeah,
It's
you
gonna
have to be
come.
proactive.
Yeah,
Like, if
yeah.
you don't prioritize it, if you don't like secure time in your calendar to do those things, it's gonna get filled and then you're late.
Yeah.
And then you end up doing, the type of work that you should be doing strategically, rush, and then that's already gonna impact negatively, kind of like the rest of the year. So I agree 100%.
Yeah, yeah. So last question, what would you tell your the younger version of yourself?
I would say part would be to not take yourself that seriously. I feel like sometimes we're like, we need to do all of these things and it has to be in this way. And like, we have all of these expectations and people have expectations of us, that you try to do those things and you don't have as much fun sometimes because you're so worried about all of these things that I have to do. So I think one of the things that I would say is like, don't take yourself that seriously. Let's take one day at a time, obviously with a plan and a North Star kind of like that you can follow. But I think that would be really important. The other one would be, you got this too. I feel like, over time, we all have experiences. I've had some like health scares too and accidents, and like I've learned that you got this. Like sometimes if you don't do things for yourself, by yourself, with yourself, I think if you don't do it like that, you're not going to know like how strong you are. So I think definitely don't take yourself that seriously. Have a little bit of fun, chill out. And then know that you can do this. Like it might seem really, really hard. I remember my therapist told me one time, you're worried about this and this and this, but you've already experienced so many tragic things. Were you able to succeed on those? Like how many of those? And I was like, yeah, all of them.
Yeah.
So you have actual data and evidence to support that you can also go through this one. So I think you got this. Like you can do it. Whether you need community or resources, it doesn't matter. You still can do this. Like everything that you've built, you've done it, strategically, you've thought about it. The power of community too is something that I hadn't necessarily thought of maybe 10 years ago. But the more that you grow up and like you keep building things, you realize that there's power in community. So like, don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it, which I think was harder for me. When you're self-funding the business and it's your baby, like you want to do things and you're like, well, I can let other people help me too.
Yeah.
And I can still be successful. And it's still, part of what I'm building. So maybe those 3 things.
That brings us to the end of another episode of Built by Us. A huge thank you to Angela for sharing her inspiring journey and the innovative work she's doing to empower brands and leaders. If you were inspired by today's conversation, be sure to follow Angela and her incredible work at the Capeles Agency. Don't forget to join us next time as we continue to highlight the stories of local entrepreneurs who are shaping our community and paving the way for future generations. Until then, I'm Jamie Arroyo, and this is Built by Us.
This is the Built by Us podcast, brought to you by Assets. Visit us at assetspa.org to learn more about the products and services we provide, and you can follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube.